Hello, I'm Bakhtiar Sonova and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Russia-Ukraine peace talks end in Geneva without breakthrough. Peru's President Jose Herri ousted after just 4 months over a secret meeting scandal. And Tehran says agreement reached on guiding principles after US-Iran talks conclude in Geneva. Peace talks between Russia, Ukraine and the United States wrapped up in Geneva without breakthrough. The meetings lasted late Tuesday and only 2 hours on Wednesday. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff had been hopeful, but both sides called the discussions difficult. Moscow and Kiev remain far apart over territory and ceasefire terms, while Zelensky accused Russia of delaying negotiations that could already be finalized.
The talks lasted for 2 days. We had very long discussions yesterday in various formats. Today we talked about 2 hours. Talks were difficult but businesslike. A new meeting will take place soon. That is all we wanted to say.
Today we had another round of trilateral negotiations in the Ukraine-US-Russia format. The discussions were intensive and substantive. We thank our U.S. partners for ensuring that the process is not stopping and continues, and Swiss side for hosting us. There is progress, but no details can be disclosed at this stage. The next step is to achieve the necessary level of consensus to submit the developed decisions for consideration by the presidents. Our task is to prepare a practical, not merely formal, foundation for this. Ukraine remains constructive. The ultimate objective is unchanged, a just and sustainable peace.
European Union finance ministers have approved national defense investment plans worth about 74 billion euros. The funding falls under the bloc's SAFE instrument, which is designed to provide low-interest loans for the joint procurement of priority military equipment. Anita Sharma brings us more from the Netherlands.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where the bloc's finance ministers approve a new wave of national defense investment plans worth about 74 billion euros. It falls under the 150 billion euro Security Action for Europe, or SAFE, loan scheme. The latest green light covers plans from Estonia, Greece, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia, and Finland. It's in addition to an initial 38 billion euros in projects endorsed last week for 8 other member states. In total, 16 of the 19 countries that applied for support under SAFE now have their plans approved, with the Czech Republic, France, and Hungary still waiting for clearance before loans can be signed, and pre-financing of up to 15% can start to flow. SAFE is a flagship EU instrument designed to make long-term, low-interest loans available for joint procurement of priority military equipment. That includes ammunition, missiles, and artillery systems to drones, air and missile defense, cyber and electronic warfare capabilities. Hardware purchased under the scheme must be largely European-made, with no more than 35% of component costs coming from outside the EU or Ukraine. A condition meant to channel demand into Europe's own defense industrial base. In parallel, defense ministers also cleared the way for a landmark agreement with Canada that will allow Canadian companies and products to take part in procurement financed by SAFE. That makes Canada the first non-European country to join the program. The Council's decision authorizes the EU to sign the bilateral deal, but it will only be formally concluded once the European Parliament gives consent. Brussels hopes the combination of oversubscribed demand from 19 member states and the opening to a G7 partner like Canada will unlock far larger private investment and help deliver the Commission's wider Readiness 2030 goal of mobilizing up to 800 billion euros for European defense by the end of this decade. For governments with weaker credit ratings, the Commission's backing should mean cheaper borrowing and faster access to urgently needed kit as they race to plug capability gaps exposed by Russia's war in Ukraine. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced plans to increase the proportion of weapons Canada purchases from domestic firms. He said the strategy is designed to strengthen the country's sovereignty rather than move it towards isolation. At present, Canada spends 70% of its weapons budget on products from the United States, a figure Carney said is too high. Under the new defense strategy, the government wants Canadian companies eventually to account for 70% of weapons procurement instead.
We have committed to double our defense expenditures by the end of this decade. And that amounts to an additional $80 billion over the next 5 years. To those ends, as the Minister mentioned, we are announcing Canada's first ever defense industrial strategy. It's a bold plan to get our armed forces what they need when they need it. It's a bold plan to scale Canadian defense companies and to put hundreds of billions of dollars into strategic sectors of our economy while creating over 125,000 high-paying jobs across Canada.
Lawmakers in Peru have voted in favor of ousting President José Gerri. The voting took place on Tuesday after a scandal involving undisclosed meetings with a Chinese businessman came to light via CCTV footage. Here is more on that story.
Peru's President José Gerri has been removed from office by a vote in Congress just 4 months into his term, becoming the country's third consecutive leader to be ousted. 75 lawmakers voted in favor of his removal following a scandal over undisclosed meetings with a Chinese businessman. 24 voted against the motion, while 3 abstained.
Following the approval of the motions of censure against the President of the Congress of the Republic, who is also acting President of the Republic, Mr. José Enrique Gerri Oré, the presiding board declares the office of President of the Congress of the Republic vacant, and consequently, the office of President of the Republic is also vacant.
The controversy, dubbed Schiffergate after a local term for Chinese restaurants, began last month. Gerri was filmed arriving late at night at a restaurant to meet Chinese businessman Zhihua Yang. He owns retail stores and holds a concession for an energy project. The meeting had not been publicly disclosed. Although Gerri acknowledged the meetings, he denied any wrongdoing, but said he would respect the outcome of the vote. Some Peruvians welcomed Congress's decision, and others feel he should have completed his term.
Very good. Long live Peru. We're always standing, never kneeling. Now I tell my suffering people, which have been subjected to thousands of forms of slavery, never again, not one more vote to these far-right parties. We will not trust them at all because they've proven their immorality and incapacity.
My opinion is that I'm not happy with what they're doing to the president by removing him from office. He should have finished his term. And how does the Peruvian people end up? How does it look? All the political stability is being lost. Look, another president is going to come in when there was already little time left for him to go. He should have completed it, but unfortunately, he has enemies against him.
Under the Constitution, the current head of Congress, Fernando Rospigliosi, would be next in line to assume the presidency, but he has declined to do so. Lawmakers must now elect a new head of Congress who will automatically take on the role of president. Elections are scheduled for the 12th of April.
Tehran and Washington wrapped up another round of indirect nuclear discussions in Geneva, keeping the channel open for further dialogue. With cautious signals from both sides, attention now turns to when and how the next phase of talks will unfold. Here is more.
Iran and the United States say they made cautious progress during a second round of nuclear talks held in Geneva on Tuesday. Speaking after the meeting, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said discussions were serious and more constructive than in the previous round. He said both sides reached an understanding on key guiding principles, but warned that more work is needed. Araghchi also stressed that progress does not mean a final deal is close.
According to these principles, and as a result of the good offices by our friendly countries in the region, which we are very grateful, a new window of opportunity has opened, under which We had the second round of the negotiations with the United States earlier today here in Geneva. We are hopeful that negotiation will lead to a sustainable and negotiated solution which can serve the interest of relevant parties and the broader region.
It's great to have you. And I do want to
US Vice President J.D. Vance also described the talks as positive in some ways, telling Fox News that President Donald Trump is seeking a solution. US officials said further discussions are needed on several details.
I think the president has a lot of options. We do have a very powerful military. The president's shown a willingness to use it. He also has a remarkable diplomatic team. He's shown a willingness to use that too. And so what the president has been very clear with the Iranians, and actually I just talked to Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner this morning about some of their negotiations, is the United States has certain red lines. Our primary interest here is we don't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. We don't want nuclear proliferation.
Iran's foreign ministry spokesman Esmail Baghei said Tehran has shared its positions on the nuclear issue, sanctions relief, and a framework for a possible agreement. A senior Iranian official told Reuters that progress depends on Washington avoiding what Tehran views as unrealistic demands and showing seriousness about lifting economic sanctions. Iran is expected to present more detailed proposals within 2 weeks. No date has been set for the next round of talks.
Meanwhile, the United States has deployed more than 50 fighter jets to the Middle East over the past 36 hours as part of a broader buildup of air and naval forces near Iran. Access reports citing a U.S. official. Independent flight trackers observed multiple F-16 Fighting Falcon, F-22 Raptor, and F-35 Lightning II aircraft heading toward the region. The military movements came amid indirect negotiations between Washington and Tehran over Iran's nuclear program, raising tensions as diplomatic efforts continue. Iran is proposing another round of talks in 2 weeks' time. Iran's Revolutionary Guards shot Hormuz Strait for a few hours during naval drills as Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei strongly warned against a U.S. military buildup in preparation for a war with Iran, despite of the renewed indirect nuclear negotiations in Geneva. Our correspondent brings us more from Tehran.
Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy shot partially the strategic Hormuz Strait connecting Persian Gulf to the Sea of Oman. The move came during the second day of its war games on Tuesday, according to state media broadcasts. The drills, codenamed Smart Control of the Strait of Hormuz, and one of the world's most critical energy corridors, transiting a significant share of global oil exports, were staged on Monday ahead of the second round of renewed Iran-US mediated nuclear talks in Geneva. As Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards shut the critical strait for a few hours for what official media reported as a move to secure safety of passing vessels, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei strongly warned against U.S. military buildup in the region. Addressing a public meeting on Tuesday, he slammed U.S. military enforcement at its bases in the region, including dispatching of 2 aircraft carriers. Meantime, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said that Iran's right to peaceful use of nuclear energy is non-negotiable, also warning that backlashes of an aggression will not be limited to Iran. He made the statement in a speech at the annual conference on disarmament in Geneva, hours after conclusion of the second round of renewed mediated nuclear negotiations with the United States. Prior to his speech at the UN's European headquarters, he termed as good progress his talks with U.S. negotiators, also stating that productive discussions were held with IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi on eve of the Iran-U.S. negotiations. Iran's Araghchi also said that no specific date has been set for the next round of negotiations. He added, it was agreed that both sides will work on the drafts of a potential agreement and then exchange these drafts. After that, we will determine a date for the third round of talks. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, Foreign News.
Millions of Muslims around the world are preparing to begin the holy month of Ramadan, with some countries starting fasting on Wednesday and others a day later, depending on the sighting of the new moon. Across the Middle East, South Asia and Southeast Asia, cities have been illuminated and markets crowded as communities ready themselves for a month of fasting, prayer and reflection.
The crescent moon has been sighted across parts of the Muslim world, marking the beginning of Ramadan, a month of fasting, prayer and reflection for nearly 2 billion people. From Jerusalem's old city to the streets of Karachi and the markets of Jakarta, cities are glowing with lanterns and lights. Shop fronts shimmer with decorations, families stock their kitchens with dates and sweets, and mosques prepare for the first evening prayers. In the West Bank, a giant illuminated crescent was raised near Hebron in hopes of drawing families back together. In Yemen, workers repaint mosque domes and worshippers open their Qurans in quiet preparation. In Damascus and Baghdad, believers gathered to watch the sky as the new moon appeared. While some countries began fasting on Wednesday after confirming the moon's sighting, others will start a day later, reflecting the centuries-old tradition of observing the lunar calendar. Across continents, despite economic hardship and conflict in some regions, the arrival of Ramadan brings a familiar rhythm. Dawn meals before sunrise, long days of fasting, and nights filled with prayer, charity and community. As lanterns flicker and the first Tarawih prayers begin, a month of spiritual renewal and shared devotion has quietly taken hold.
Tonight, Azerbaijan's Karabakh Football Club take on Newcastle United in Baku in the UEFA Champions League playoff round. The match is expected to draw a packed stadium, with home supporters hoping Karabakh can secure a historic step toward the group stage. Our Katie Wilson spoke to fans ahead of the game.
Today is the day that Karabakh are taking on Newcastle United in the knockout stages of the UEFA Champions League. And around 2,000 of the Toon Army, the Black and White Army, that's Newcastle's fans, have descended upon Baku. And most of them are right here in Fountain Square. So let's have a chat to them to see their impressions of the Land of Fire and their expectations for the game tonight.
I think it's a really, really nice place.
Baku?
Yeah.
It's an excellent place, excellent. Spotless clean, brilliant people, having a great time.
And what's your expectation ahead of the game?
I think we're going to win. I think it depends. If we have a good game, we'll beat anyone, but if we play not as well, then...
Bruno's a big miss, isn't he? Yeah. Bruno's a big miss, but Newcastle 3-0 though. 3-0 Newcastle.
Now, when Chelsea were here, it was 2-2. Karabakh kept it to 2-2. Does that make you nervous?
Not really. It's Chelsea.
Yeah.
It's like I said, if we play, we can beat anyone. So we play well. So good night tonight, hopefully.
Yeah. The expectation ahead of the game?
Newcastle 3-1. 3-1. Voltemora, 2 goals. Voltemora brace. Newcastle 3-1.
So what's been your impression of Baku so far?
Oh, it's beautiful. We got here yesterday and just had a walk around, and it's absolutely stunning. It's nothing like what I thought it was going to be. And I've shared pictures with my friends, and they just absolutely stunning. Beautiful city, beautiful.
And how are the people? Have you got to meet some locals?
Yeah, we have actually. I'm staying with a local family. They are just so kind and helpful. And everybody that we've came across is just so nice, really nice.
And what's your expectation ahead of the game?
I'm never really sort of confident, but I think we're going to win 2-1.
You get a good game from Karabakh?
I hope so. I hope it's a good game. It would be good, you know. Obviously, Karabakh is a very good team. I know Liverpool won 6-0, but I don't think that the scoreline really sort of told the whole story, because Karabakh is a good team. So I'm hoping for a win, but you know. But we're having a great time anyway. We love it. It's great. And the weather's nice.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss US-mediated Russia-Ukraine peace talks in Geneva. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. Our top story for discussion. Fresh US-mediated talks between Russia and Ukraine in Geneva have ended without a breakthrough, underscoring how wide the gap remains on territory, security guarantees and the terms of any ceasefire. Despite early optimism from U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff, both sides described the discussions as difficult, as Washington signals growing impatience, and European allies continue to press for momentum after 4 years of war. To unpack what's really happening behind the scenes, we are joined by Alik Gazman, director of Protect Ukraine Now, speaking to us from Chicago, United States. Alik, welcome to the program.
Hi.
Hi. So why did the Geneva talks stall despite U.S. mediation, and what are the biggest gaps between Moscow and Kiev right now?
The biggest problem is Russia is not interested in meaningful negotiations. As they believe they are achieving their objectives on the front line, and they're going to pursue until that situation is reversed. The only way Russia is going to agree to any sort of peace deal is when Ukraine is in a strong position to defend its territories.
Mr. Gazman, how serious was U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff's earlier optimism?
Again, I don't believe this optimism is based. As we have seen from the latest round, there were no joint communique, there were no published text of what was agreed upon, and really the only hope is that there was some prisoner exchange agreed on, which is, if that's true, that's welcome news for those who are waiting on their loved ones. However, everything else that is not supported by the situation on the ground is unfortunately can only be a wishful thinking.
In your view, what did Kremlin negotiator Vladimir Medinsky mean by saying it was a business-like talks?
Kremlin is signaling that they're interested in negotiations. That's what President Trump demands, and they pretend that they've followed. However, Moscow hasn't stepped back from their maximum demands they have issued in the beginning of the war. And again, I don't think they are interested in negotiations, but they're going to signal that they're making progress.
So is Ukraine gaining or losing leverage as talks drag on?
I don't think Ukraine is losing leverage, but it certainly in much at all. The time is being dragged on, continues, and until Ukraine is in a stronger position, there'll be no change. Really, this means is continue to lose time, just like most of the previous year went into continuous rounds of negotiations that had no results.
Mr. Gazman, how much pressure is President Donald Trump now putting on both sides?
We can actually see some good pressure being put on Russia. The arrests of Russian Shadow Fleet are definitely good news, and latest in that direction, India is apparently joining the U.S. in stopping Russian Shadow Fleet. That would be great if more European countries could do the same thing, and that would definitely put more pressure on Russia. Where President Trump is making a mistake is he doesn't arm Ukraine to the right levels. Again, peace through strength is the only format that has ever worked, and for Russia to and consider that they should end the hostility, Ukraine has to be in a strong position, and that same thing goes to any security guarantee discussions. Any security guarantee starts with armed Ukrainian forces, and until they able to defend themselves, until they have the right kind of equipment in the right quantities, there's no guarantee that Russia will not try another hostility in a matter of weeks or months.
So what do you think? Could U.S. impatience change Washington's approach?
President Trump is open to selling weapons to Ukraine as long as Europeans are paying for this. I imagine this will not change, but Washington may decide that they no longer want to be a mediator in peace talks that go nowhere.
So what role can Europe play if U.S.-led talks collapse?
What are you asking about? What we can do as an American?
Yes, if U.S.-mediated talks collapse, what role can Europe play now?
Well, we work with Congress, with Senate, and we're making sure that our position is delivered. What we believe has to happen is U.S. arm Ukraine, and we explaining why this is necessary to end the war. End of war starts with strong Ukraine.
Mr. Kazman, finally, what should we watch for in the next round of negotiations?
If you're not hearing any results coming from communications, that means they, and I have expectations. We talked about it on your program many times in the past, and just like previously, I have to say that I have no expectations, not from these negotiations, not from the next set, until the situation on the ground changes. Any negotiations can only reflect what is happening in reality.
Alek Kazman, thank you very much for talking to A News and for your insights. We truly appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Now, after the break, we'll take a look at the major stories from the region. Welcome back to A News. Now, let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Azerbaijan will support the construction and renovation of schools that have been destroyed or damaged in Syria, according to the Ministry of Science and Education of Azerbaijan. Strategic partnership agreement on restoring Syria's educational infrastructure was signed at ISESCO headquarters in Rabat on Tuesday, where Azerbaijan's Minister of Science and Education, Emin Emrollayev, Syria's Education Minister, Dr. Mohammed Abdulrahman Turko, and ISESCO Director General, Dr. Salim bin Mohammed Al-Malik. Under the agreement, Azerbaijan will support the restoration of educational infrastructure in Syria, including the construction of nearly 10 new school buildings and the major renovation of around 100 damaged schools. At the C6 conference in Baku, experts focused on strengthening regional ties, boosting trade and transport, and addressing security and economic challenges. Key discussions highlighted the Middle Corridor Trans-Caspian routes and turning strategic dialogue into practical projects across Central Asia and the Caspian region.
Azerbaijan is stepping into a new phase of regional cooperation as it joins Central Asia's consultative platform, expanding the format from C5 to C6. At a major conference in Baku, experts say this shift could strengthen strategic dialogue, boost connectivity through the Middle Corridor, and reshape economic and political ties across the wider Caspian region.
At the international conference, C6 One Region Shared Future, Strengthening Strategic Dialogue, participants focused on the Middle Corridor and Trans-Caspian routes, describing them as vital links connecting Asia and Europe.
Specifically, I would like to mention Middle Corridor connectivity because I would say that's the backbone of the partnership with Central Asian countries, especially now in the context that the global powers like United States and European Union, they have interest in promoting connectivity across Central Asia.
Speakers highlighted that landlocked Central Asian countries rely on Azerbaijan's transport and energy infrastructure to reach global markets, reinforcing the country's role as a strategic regional hub.
Accession to the Trans Corridor modality
via Azerbaijan to Turkey, it will allow us to open our opportunities to the South Europe, to Caucasus and to the Gulf. And also this is gate for the South European countries to the Central Asia. So in this regard, the Trump corridor is not just about connection to parts of Azerbaijan, it's also about connection to different parts of the world via Azerbaijan.
Beyond economic issues, discussions also covered regional security, climate challenges, and the need to move from dialogue to practical cooperation mechanisms.
Looking ahead, the format has very strong potential, especially in an era of increasing regionalization in global politics. I believe that in the future, as peace processes advance, countries such as Georgia and Armenia could join, and Turkey's participation may also become possible.
Experts concluded that the expanded C6 format could turn shared interests into concrete projects, fostering a more connected, strategically aligned and economically integrated region.
Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan have launched a pilot cargo corridor with China. The first freight train departed from China to Tajikistan, carrying consumer goods and construction equipment. Uzbek-Chinese firm UTK International Logistics is operating the pilot train. The freight train consists of 8 40-foot containers. It departed from the city of Lanzhou in northwestern China and will pass through Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan en route to Dushanbe 2 station in Tajikistan. The transit route stretches over a distance of 3,500 kilometers and takes between 18 to 20 days to complete. The trial transport corridor is part of an agreement to deepen regional cooperation between the countries. The European Parliament is preparing to reopen discussions on a long-stalled partnership agreement with Turkmenistan as the country's president plans an official visit to Brussels. The talks come amid renewed diplomatic engagement and growing interest in energy cooperation. Our correspondent has more details.
Turkmenistan's President Serdar Berdimuhamedov is planning an official visit to Brussels as the European Parliament moves closer to discussing a long-delayed partnership agreement with the Central Asian state. The trip is expected to include meetings with EU leaders and senior officials. At the same time, lawmakers in Brussels are preparing to revisit the ratification of the Comprehensive Partnership and Cooperation Agreement, a document that has remained on hold for more than 2 decades. Until now, relations between the two sides have been governed by a temporary trade agreement. And according to the EU's ambassador to Turkmenistan, the issue is expected to be discussed during an inter-parliamentary meeting in early March. The agreement has remained unratified since 1998, largely due to long-standing concerns within the European Union over the human rights situation in the country. Turkmenistan remains the only post-Soviet state without a fully ratified partnership agreement with the EU. Energy is expected to feature prominently on the agenda. Turkmenistan holds the world's 4th largest natural gas reserves and is seeking to diversify its export routes. At present, the majority of its gas exports are directed to China. The European Union is also showing interest in Turkmenistan's renewable energy potential. According to the Asian Development Bank, the country has significant capacity for solar power generation. Any future energy supplies to Europe would require major infrastructure projects, including routes across the Caspian Sea. Turkmenistan has followed the policy of permanent neutrality since gaining independence in 1991. At the same time, since 2022, Ashgabat has intensified diplomatic engagement with Western countries alongside Russia, China and its Central Asian neighbors. And the planned visit to Brussels could mark an important step in the evolution of relations between Turkmenistan and the European Union. Fariza Kalemurzina, Almaty, A-News.
In Agdam, one of the most heavily mined areas of Karabakh, teams are working around the clock to clear landmines and make the region safe. The Azerbaijan Ministry of Emergency Situations is leading large-scale operations to remove mines and unexploded ordnance across the region.
Every step, every movement is a danger here. Now we are in Agdam, once a cultural center in the heart of Karabakh, but now it is the symbol of resilience. Special staff are working tirelessly to clear mines left behind by conflict.
In the Agdam region, the Azerbaijan Ministry of Emergency Situations continues large-scale operations to clear landmines and unexploded ordnance. Agdam is considered one of the most heavily mined areas in Karabakh, which is why special units of the ministry's Special Risk Rescue Service are using multiple methods to make these territories safe again.
Mine clearance operations are carried out here in parallel using 3 methods: manual mine clearance using canine teams, and mechanical mine clearance using the GCS 200 brand. The mechanical mine clearance vehicle aims to ensure the safety of personnel.
Operations are conducted with great precision in designated strategic areas, villages and settlements, around drinking water reservoirs, and along irrigation channels. Demining personnel working with dogs and advanced technical equipment undergo specialized professional training to operate safely in these high-risk environments.
The personnel involved in the implementation of the tasks, after participating in international-level training and obtaining appropriate certificates, are released to carry out the tasks in the area. The personnel has been equipped with tools and equipment that meet the latest and most modern technologies.
Since November 2020, over 252,000 hectares of land in liberated areas have been cleared of mines and unexploded remnants of war. Each cleared field is a step closer to rebuilding Agdam and bringing its people safely back home.
Turkey has marked another milestone in its long-standing relationship with NATO. As the alliance's second-largest military power, Ankara has underscored its role through major deployments to Europe's largest NATO exercise, while preparing to host the alliance's next summit. Adam Maro reports from Istanbul.
Turkey on Wednesday marked its 74th year as a member of the NATO alliance, highlighting its long-standing role in transatlantic security. The anniversary comes as Turkish military aircraft, naval vessels, and ground forces take part in NATO's annual Steadfast Dart military exercises in Germany, which are set to conclude on Friday. Earlier this month, Turkey deployed around 2,000 troops, along with aircraft and naval assets, to participate in the large-scale drills conducted under the direction of NATO's Joint Force Command. The deployment marked the first time Turkey has sent such a sizable military force to Northern Europe, a move widely seen as reflecting the country's growing weight within NATO's defense architecture. Steadfast Dart is NATO's largest annual military exercise. This year's drills involve roughly 10,000 troops from 11 NATO member states, including Germany, Italy, France, the United Kingdom, and Spain. The exercises are designed to test NATO's rapid reaction and collective defense capabilities in the event of an unexpected crisis on the European continent. During this year's war games, the Turkish Navy deployed Bayraktar TB3 armed drones for the first time in a NATO exercise, marking what military commanders described as a new doctrine for amphibious operations within the alliance. Turkey joined NATO on February 18, 1952, during the decades-long Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. Today, Turkey fields the second-largest military in NATO after the United States. In July, Ankara is set to host the 36th NATO summit, which will bring together heads of state and senior officials from the alliance's 32 member countries. This is Adam Maro for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Now we'll take a short break. Right after the break, we'll discuss Turkey's 74th anniversary in North Atlantic Treaty Organization and its pivotal role in Euro-Atlantic security. See you shortly. Welcome back to A News. Turkey today marks 74 years as a member of North Atlantic Treaty Organization, a relationship that has shaped the alliance's southern flank since 1952. NATO is hailing Turkey as a staunch ally, citing its second largest army, sustained defense investment, and pivotal role from the Black Sea to the Middle East, at a moment when Euro-Atlantic security faces its most complex test in decades. Joining us now is Bekir İlhan from the Turkey Research Foundation, speaking to us from Ankara. Mr. İlhan, we are grateful to have you with us to unpack what 74 years of NATO membership means for Turkey and what comes next for the alliance. So welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So 74 years on, how would you characterize the evolution of Turkey-NATO relations from Cold War anchor to today's frontline ally?
Yeah, I would say the evolution is the right term here. As you said, that today marks the Turkey's 74th anniversary within the NATO alliance. You know, Turkey admitted to the NATO together with Greece 74 years ago. And since then, I would say Turkey has made significant contributions to the alliance, I would say. But I would say Turkey has always been an important part of the Euro-Atlantic security, but the degree of this position, I would say, has changed fundamentally. You know, looking back, I would say in the earlier year of the alliance, Turkey was kind of a security consumer in the alliance. But right now, as its current military power and economic power, I would say Turkey is more a security provider in the alliance, I would say. Of course, Turkey is not a tiny country, you know, given its military power, economic power, population, etc. But, you know, I would say during the Cold War era and afterward, I would say Turkey's military power, Turkey's military capacity within the alliance has not matched to the Turkey's political weights. And now Turkey is trying to change it. And I would say some NATO allies, you know, are having a hard time to accept this reality. You know, during the last decades, I would say they even discussed expelling Turkey from the NATO alliance. But after the Ukraine war, I would say they suddenly realized the Turkey's role in NATO alliance, and now they accept that the European security, the transatlantic security, is incomplete, you know, without Turkey, and they know that they need Turkey more than ever.
Mr. İlhan, Ankara's defense industry, particularly UAVs, have surged. How is this reshaping burden sharing and interoperability within NATO?
Yeah, the burden sharing concept and the interoperability are the most fundamental concepts of the NATO alliance right now. Of course, the United States is the largest country in the NATO alliance, and the American elites have always been warning Europe to take care of their security, or they warned the other NATO members to, you know, increase their GDP share of the military defense. But so far, I would say the American elites, you know, are dissatisfied with the current level of the NATO members' operational and military readiness, and of course, it creates some difficulties within the alliance. But Turkey, I would say, at this point, you know, stands out. You know, Turkey's position is different, as you said, that Turkey has invested too much in defense capacity and defense capabilities, especially domestic defense capacity. I would say, you know, during the especially last decade, you know, Turkey now is a very extremely good position, I would say, you know, compared to other NATO countries. Of course, you know, if you're a weak state, you know, you cannot contribute to the alliance. But if you're a strong state, you know, you can easily contribute to the alliance. And as I said, that you can transfer yourself into a security provider in the alliance. And of course, the Turkish UAVs and Turkish military equipments, I would say, are also, you know, they are at the NATO standards. Of course, it's an important thing because, as you said, that interoperability is an important concept in a military alliance. You know, your vehicles or your military systems should match with the other NATO systems, and I would say, and this is a very important concept in terms of operational readiness and combat readiness, I would say, because NATO at the end of the day is an alliance, and in a event of war, the NATO countries will fight together, and for sure this kind of systems integration and this kinds of military cooperation is very important. And I would say right now, individually, I would say Turkey is doing its best to match NATO standards, and also Turkey is doing best to achieve NATO's new military share standards in the alliance, I would say.
So counter-terrorism has been a core Turkish priority. How aligned are NATO partners on threat definitions and responses?
Yeah, Turkey struggled with the PKK terrorist organization for many years, and during this time, Turkey has gained enormous military experience, and also Turkey contributed to peacekeeping operations in NATO, in Afghanistan, in Balkans, and so far, as I said, given its counterterrorism capacity and given its peacekeeping missions role, I would say, Turkey also contributed to the alliance too much. But for now, I would say the challenge for NATO is not a non-conventional challenge. It's a conventional challenge. It's the Russian threat, especially after the Ukraine invasion. I would say NATO, is trying to change its operational concepts, and again the European continent has become the most important area for NATO, because after the Cold War, NATO's role also evolved into non-European areas. I would say NATO has engaged many military operations around the world, but right now after the Ukraine invasion, I would say NATO is back in Europe, and for now I would say the conventional threats like Russian threats are important threats for NATO, and NATO should take care of this kind of threats, and NATO should develop new operational concepts to handle such conventional threats. And for this kind of threats, I would say Turkey can also contribute to the Euro-Atlantic security. Turkey is an important country for NATO's southern flank, and also for the Black Sea geopolitics, and also for the European, in case of a European continental war, Turkey is given its land forces, I would say, can play an important role, because Turkish land forces is also an experienced branch of military, I would say, and given its military personnel and given its quality of its officer corps, I would say Turkey can contribute to NATO in case of a European continental war. But for sure, we do not want such a war, ideally. But in case of a Russian attack, I would say, Turkey, I would say, besides the Americans, I would say, will be one of the important and key actors in such a combat, I would say.
Bekir İlhan, thank you for joining us and for your valuable insights. We appreciate your time and perspective on Turkey's role in NATO at this pivotal moment. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Have a good day.
That's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for more updates, and thank you for watching.